Aaron Rodgers, if he's going to stay in Green Bay, if he's going to leave. The one thing he said, he doesn't want to go to a rebuild. He doesn't want to go to a team that's not in a position to win. I don't think it would be hard for Jerry Jones to fire Mike McCarthy if Sean Payton became available.
Got Mac and Mac here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel on Birds 365. Do us a favor, punch that like button. What should they do, John?
Like, share, and subscribe. I was just putting up my head coaching predictions, Jody. My current predictions.
Okay. How often do you do that?
I think that's the second time. I just
all right. Run them down for me.
I felt like giving Old Takes Exposed something to tweet down the road. All right, I'll give them to you. Chicago Bears. I'm going with Matt Eberflus. Denver Broncos. Nathaniel Hackett. Houston Texans. Jonathan Gannon.
You're trying to get your boy JG out of town. I don't get it.
Jacksonville Jaguars. Now it's just what I think is going to happen. Byron Leftwich.
Yeah, I like that one.
Las Vegas Raiders. I have no stinking idea. Can't get a beat on that team ever. Miami Dolphins. Vance Joseph. Minnesota Vikings. Kevin O'Connell. New York Giants is the easiest one. Brian Daboll.
So, and that's it? You ran them down all?
That's it. That's all of them.
Here's the question I would have to you after you run them down as that. Flores not getting a gig.
Not right now. I don't see a path. I do not see a path for Brian Flores.
And if that's the way that it shakes out, basically I would say.
Now the Raiders, I don't, maybe.
Right, you haven't put the Raiders into the mix yet. If it's me just sitting back and analyzing it, I would say that since right now no one has hired their new coach, that means that 8 teams have failed. Because even though you and I are both Doug Pederson fans and want to see him get a job and can understand why he's not in the mix, Flores is the leading candidate. That's my estimation. Is he a better fit with some more than others? Sure. Any team that's looking for a head coach right now, they've got choices of anybody. Because nobody signed, yeah, that would be a failure for everything for me because he's the number one candidate. And in some years, at least the way I look at it, you got 2 or 3 candidates, 3 or 4 candidates. They're all close. They're all the same. Well, take the guy that's a better fit for you. You got a better offense as of right now, so he's an offense. No, he's the best candidate. There's him, and then they start to come down in a pecking order. And you don't think the number one candidate, that's my opinion, that's my ranking of him, you don't think he's going to get a gig, huh?
No, I'm looking at it because I keep this little tracker of who interviews where because it gets, I'm trying to see where he's interviewed. Chicago interviewed him on January 14th, so really early in the process. Denver did not interview him. They're already down to the finalists. Houston interviewed him early. There was some speculation there because of his history with Nick Caserio, but that is sort of seems to have wavered. Jacksonville did not interview him. The Raiders have not, but they just got started. The Dolphins did not.
They kind of fired him, so I don't.
I
don't think they're going to re-interview him.
Yeah, I was just going down. I'm not thinking looking at the list. You're right. Obviously, the Vikings did not. The Giants did, or are expected. I don't know if the Giants. There was talk, but I don't know if it ever happened. I never confirmed that.
And the reason why I like your line of thinking is. The Giants just hired the assistant general manager,
exactly.
Bills, and Dable's been there the last couple of years. And I like Dable, and I think he's a legit candidate. I think he pales in comparison to Flores. The Giants and all these other teams who haven't brought him in for an interview, I think, are making a major mistake. He's, for me, the runaway best candidate this offseason.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm the first to admit I have no idea if any of these guys are going to be good head coaches. It's tough to speculate. Again, I'll go back to Nick Sirianni. A lot of people laughed at the Eagles. Like, he ended up being the best head coach. Go back to 2016. Everybody killed the Eagles. They got the best head coach in that class. I've seen too many Adam Gazes who people told me, oh, this guy's an offensive genius. He's one of the worst head coaches I've ever seen on 2 different occasions. The problem with head coaches is so much is intangible, so much is leadership, so much is the ability to get people to on the same page. And, how do you measure that? How do you put a picture? I don't, you can look at somebody's offensive scheme, defensive scheme. It's not going to tell you if they're going to be a good head coach. It's not. It's going to tell you probably if they're going to be a good coordinator somewhere. Todd Bowles would be my most example of that. I wasn't happy with him this weekend, but overall, he's a pretty darn good coordinator over a large sample size. I know you didn't think he was a good head coach. I know a lot of Jets fans didn't think he was a good head coach. More to it than scheme. And that's where you get that adage, if you're hiring a scheme, you're doing it wrong.
I'll give you the 2 reasons why I'm as big a Flores fan as I am. And they came to fruition in the second half of this season. I thought he was a good hire when they hired him. I thought he did a pretty damn good job last year. Won 10 games last year. Dolphins didn't make the playoffs, but he won 10 games last year. And this year, he won 7 games in a row. Now, granted, he lost 7 games in a row, too, but he won 7 games in a row, and that's not good enough to keep your job. They end up losing in week 17, because, we played 17, so it was week 18. So they lose in week 17, and it eliminates them from the playoffs. Week 18, Patriots still playing for the potential to win that division. The Dolphins, having been eliminated from playoff contention, have every right to go out and just flat out lay an egg and not play well. And he goes and beats Belichick last week of the season when Belichick is still desperate to win and he's got nothing to do. Flores goes and beats him, and he's not the top coaching candidate. All right, I'll give you more. Are you? I think you and I touched on this from time to time on the show. How big a Pro Football Talk fan are you?
Not that big.
Really?
It's mainly from. That's a bigger conversation. Mainly, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, you're not as big a fan. I think Florio's got good sources. I think he's a good writer. I'm on it umpteen times a day, every day. And he fleshed something out last week, 10 days ago, whenever it was, which I think just pointed to what Flores had to deal with. The whole Deshaun Watson to Miami thing. Season goes, they lose late, they don't make the playoffs. Here come the stories about the coach desperately wanted the Dolphins to trade for Deshaun Watson. That no one else in the organization, it was all about the coach coming in and banging his fist on the table. You got to get me Deshaun Watson, which Florio threw the flag on and go, that's just not true. As he was reporting on the story during the season, it was all about Stephen Ross, who then threw a monkey wrench into it and said, oh, we'll take Deshaun. They worked the deal out, but he's got to get all his lawsuits settled before we make the deal. Well, in other words, you're not making the deal. But Ross was doing all that negotiating, and they had stories planted with guys like Adam Schefter to tell the tale that they want told, which was, oh, wasn't us. Well, no, we weren't doing it. It was a coach who desperately. So we, to appease the coach, had to go out and try as hard as we could for Deshaun Watson. And it just wasn't true. So, 2 days later, Schefter had to come out with a cover his rear end tweet of, well, no, I'm now being told that the entire organization was behind the desired acquisition of Deshaun Watson. It was the owner who wanted Deshaun Watson, not the general manager, not the coach. They were all in the loop, but the driving force was Ross, and he wanted to wash his hands on it. So let's stick it on the coach. Let's fire his rear end, and we'll make him the fall guy for us. First of all, wanting to get Deshaun Watson, and then not being able to get Deshaun Watson. So the guy got screwed too on the way out the door. And if you have to work for an owner like that, that tells me that you've got a chance to work for any owner in the league. That's one of the reasons why I like Flores as much as I do. I think he was painted with an ugly brush that he didn't deserve down in Miami.
Well, I will say this, and we kind of talked about it. Well, a couple things. You went into how the sausage was made, and it's our buddy Mike Sealski. I'll give him credit for this term. Information brokers. So a lot of the things that Adam Schefter, and insert name in any other sport, you know who they are, get the information they get is because they're handed the information by powerful people, whether it's owner, GM, and it's sort of a trade-off. It's not traditional reporting where you get double sourced. It's handed. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. And what we talked about with Doug Pederson is the second part of it. Well, that's a big part of being a head coach in this league. And if you can't get along with the owner, you're not going to be a head coach in this league. And that's one of those intangibles. Like, you can't put a number on that. You can't say, well, he's 31st in the league or he's first in the league at getting along with his owner. You can't do it.
There's not a list like that, McMullen. You can't find that anywhere on the internet. Come on, you know where to find it.
So we put on, is Jeffrey Lurie, and I don't believe he is, as I said. Is he trying to disparage Doug Pederson when people make that call? I don't know 100%. I don't think he is. I know they tried to spin their way out of firing a Super Bowl winning coach, and they said some negative things in that fashion, and maybe that has carried over. Well, if the owner doesn't like you and you're not getting along with the owner, and all of a sudden owners talk to owners and they start saying, well, what am I getting with Brian Flores and Stephen Ross? And I don't know if this happened, but that was the spin coming out of South Florida. I don't have that. First, it was Chris Greer. It had nothing to do with Chris Greer, the GM. It had to do with the owner and the relationship with the owner. So if, some of these teams who have interviewed Brian Flores are calling up Stephen Ross, and he said, this guy's a pain in the you-know-what. You can't get along with him. Too headstrong, all that kind of stuff. Well, that's going to limit you. But nobody knows that other than some of the more empirical evidence that you put out there about, look, if you win 10 games, you should never be fired. If you win a Super Bowl, the only franchise in Super Bowl history, guess what? You shouldn't be fired 3 years after the fact. Shouldn't be. You don't get along with the boss, you're going to get fired.
Yeah, things kind of accelerate. I did want to ask you about this because this came kind of out of left field, at least for me yesterday. That Sean Payton might take a break from the New Orleans Saints. It's, again, big picture, you knew it was always a possibility, but unless someone is reporting it directly, you kind of forget that it's a possibility. That grabbed me this week with the whole Brady retiring thing. Because we got through the entire season and nobody asked Brady or brought it up with Brady or put Brady on the spot about him potentially retiring. And then it was almost like somebody had a football crystal ball and the Bucs were going to lose and say, let me get this story out there before everybody else brings it up. Because after you're losing, the season's over, people's attentions turn to, well, would Tom actually think about retiring? I give credit to whoever broke the story or speculated on the story before the game, leading up to the week before, about, Brady could walk away. And I had not given it a moment's thought. But if he does walk away, give credit to the guy who went above and beyond before the game and before they got beat. Same thing with Sean Payton. Sean Payton's, I think wasn't he the first NFL head coach to get COVID? 2 years ago, and he had to go into isolation, and like he got it again this year. He's had some health issues from time to time. He's got player issues down there in New Orleans. I think of him as one of the best coaches in the NFL. He got one Super Bowl, and others have got more
Only
than him.
One.
Right.
Only one.
But he's
I
been
always
in the,
laugh at that. Yeah.
he's been
Very
in the
hard to
mix
win a
for
Super Bowl.
several others. But
Yeah.
right, he does have one that there aren't that many guys who can actually say that. That he might look to either walk away, retire, or take a year off, or see if the Saints want to try and trade him to another team and get something in return if he wants to go on with it. It sounds kind of like the Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay. Could retire, could stay put, could kind of force a trade. What do you make of this kind of evolving Sean Payton, not a lock to be the Saints head coach story?
Well, I think that would, I just mentioned I put out my coaching predictions. That would upheave everything if he did say, I want out, and I want to go to a different organization. There would be a lot of teams in that line to try to get Sean Payton, starting with everyone for years has speculated Dallas because he lives there. Jerry loves him. Everybody talks about Dallas has 47 head coaches in waiting, basically at all times, because nobody stops talking about that team. Look, I don't know. When you have Drew Brees for that long, like it's tough. It's tough. You go, do I want to go through this again? They did a great job getting as close as they did with Taysom Hill, all the issues, Trevor Siemian, which kind of tells you the coach Sean is, but it's so much harder when you don't have the Drew Brees behind the line of scrimmage, and you can do so many different things. And I think guys just get tired and they say, do I want to go through this again? It's like, when people are speculating Aaron Rodgers, if he's going to stay in Green Bay, if he's going to leave, the one thing he said, he doesn't want to go to a rebuild. He doesn't want to go to a team that's not in a position to win. Same thing with coaches. They don't want to go to somebody who doesn't have a quarterback, who doesn't have a certain situation at the quarterback. And how many coaches are in trouble that have good quarterbacks? Very few, because that's the secret sauce. And again, we just talked about. It doesn't surprise me he's thinking about end of the day, though, Jody. I think he's not even 60 years old. I think he's 57, 58, somewhere in that range. I don't think he's retiring. I'll say that. May he want to see the greener grass on the other side of the fence? Yeah, he might want to go to a situation where they have a quarterback, or at least a young quarterback that can develop, because it doesn't look good right now in New Orleans at that particular position.
Right. You look at the steps that he had to take. Excuse me. He had Drew Brees, and he didn't have Drew Brees anymore because he retired. So he goes with Jameis Winston. Oh, that's a drop off. But it's not off the table. It's just a pretty big step backwards. And then Jameis gets hurt. So you got to go to Taysom Hill, who you got to know is not a starting quarterback in the National Football League, but he's your third quarterback from where you were just however many games previous at the end of the last season. And then Taysom Hill gets hit. So you're now trotting Trevor Siemian out there. You've gone from Drew Brees to Jameis Winston to Taysom Hill to Trevor Siemian. And yes, that's who the Eagles beat. And that's the reason that the Eagles did make the playoffs, because the Saints finished with the same records as the Eagles, but the Eagles got it because they beat him head up. They beat Trevor Siemian. Yeah, I can see where it sets in that he goes, yeah, this is not too rosy a picture. I don't know how many more years I want to do this overall. So if I can weasel my way out of town into a better situation with a better quarterback, I kind of rode Drew Brees' coattails for a whole bunch of success down there in New Orleans. Let me see if I could hop on somewhere else. Who do you think would fall into that category? If all of a sudden there's an announcement this week that, yes, the Saints are willing to talk about trading Sean Payton, who do you think would be the teams calling?
Well, everybody. And that's why, obviously.
Not the Kansas City Chiefs.
No, I meant the teams. I'm sorry, the teams that have an opening right now.
The 8 of 8 that have the open,
Yeah.
right?
And remember, they have more information than we do. So we talk about nobody's hired. Maybe they're slow playing. Maybe they have information. I don't think that's the case. I think more so because the NFL is very concerned about how things look from a public relations standpoint when teams identify coaches that that people outside the NFL world don't deem worthy. Jonathan Gannon took a lot of hits like this because he's a very young guy. People say he doesn't deserve to be in the position he's in. Whereas you have older, proven coordinators. David Culley, a perfect example of a guy who did a good job by everyone's estimation, and he gets fired. Why? Because he was hired to be a bridge to begin with. And unfortunately, that looks bad on the league because one is a minority and one isn't, if that's the way the Houston Texans go. So it comes off poorly. But if Sean Payton becomes available, we just talked about, I don't know what the Raiders are going to do. Well, start there, right there. I mean, that's a pretty good quarterback. Derek Carr, not great, not in the upper echelon, but certainly right there, probably in tier 2. I think Sean Payton could do some things. Dallas, Jerry Jones, they don't have an opening. He does live in Dallas. Jerry loves him. He used to be the assistant head coach there. People forget before he went to New Orleans. It's been so long. Has always wanted Sean Payton back in the family, so to speak. I don't think it would be hard for Jerry Jones to fire Mike McCarthy if Sean Payton became available. But in short, if you have an avenue to get out of where you are, there aren't a lot of coaches. It starts with Bill and Andy, and the coaches that are entrenched, but there aren't a ton of those. And it starts making you think, well, if I can do better, you start thinking about doing better.
All right. And I already know the answer to this question, but I'll let you get on the record with it. Vegas or Dallas? If you're Payton, not that you have control, but you can.
Oh, he would go to Dallas. I mean, he lives there. He still has a home there. He loves it there. He would
just and put that aside. Just purely talking about roster in place, ownership, everything else above and beyond the fact that he was a former Cowboy, whatever. Just evaluating the position that you're moving into, which is the better job, taking over the Cowboys, taking over the Raiders.
They're neither are great organizations, so then you just break it down to talent, facilities, and everything's first class in Dallas. And the Raiders.
Pretty nice stadium, Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I was there. It's not AT&T Stadium, even the stadium, and not AT&T. Dallas has, again, people. I've complimented Dallas too much for an Eagles show, but they have first class everything. I mean, one thing, it's ridiculous. I joked, when we were down there this year, we were doing a little video hit for Sports Illustrated, and Martin was doing one for the Wilmington News Journal. And we were talking to one of the employees taking the elevator down to the field to do the hit. And we just happened to be talking. And I have these nice blazers on, weird. You don't see employees at a sporting event in a 3-piece suit. They all have these blazers. They're tailored for the employees. Tailored. Not just hand them out.
Not off the rack.
No.
They're tailored.
Yeah. Everything. The star, if you've ever seen the star on All or Nothing, I forget if it was on Amazon. You probably remember, Jody.
No, it was on the
Hard Knocks
HBO show.
Yeah, Hard Knocks.
They had the drone camera do the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, that thing is unbelievable. It is The only facility that compares to it is Minnesota's, which is why that's a good place. And then the money, um, Jerry's always willing. The problem with Dallas is he's too involved with personnel and he's too involved with making those decisions. But everything's first class, and the Raiders are the Raiders. I mean, I don't want to say an NFL owner is poor because everything is relative and compared to you and me and everybody else. Mark Davis has a lot of money compared to an NFL owner. Mark Davis is a pauper. He's poor. And Jerry Jones has, he's up there with Stan Kroenke and all those guys. So just from that perspective, yeah, it's Dallas.
And oh, by the way, it's funny because at least I saw it reported this past week. Mark Davis's main confidant in the NFL, Jerry Jones.
Yeah.
That Al and Jerry had become buddies in Al's later stages in life, and he passed that along to Mark, and Mark and Jerry became buddies. And when they're looking for a coach right now, and Jerry isn't or says he isn't because Mike McCarthy's still on the contract, he'll consult the guy like Jerry Jones.
Well, everybody. Well, that's the brilliance of Jerry Jones. For people that don't know this, he's got a stadium company. So anytime the NFL builds one of these new stadiums, he's got his finger in that because his company is controlling things like concessions and things like that. So when you see Allegiant Stadium, SoFi Stadium, US Bank Stadium, Mercedes-Benz, on and on and on, Jerry's making money off them too. It's unbelievable. That's why, businessman.
The all-time number one businessman. Nobody's arguing that. All right, here's something I want to argue with over the last 15 minutes of the show here today. Yes, most people, after watching the action this past weekend, the best weekend in the history of the National Football League with some tremendous quarterback play, looking at it through an Eagle perspective, said, yikes, the Birds are that much further away than maybe I thought they were. When they got into the playoffs, tanked the last game. It didn't even have to play the last game. We're already in the playoffs. We're moving right along here. Things are looking up. And then they got their doors blown out by Tampa Bay, and you had this past weekend where the quarterback play was on a level certainly much higher than anything Jalen Hurts showed this week. I could see the downside. I can understand where the people are coming from that said, this does not look good from an Eagle perspective. But I'll give you some spin, Johnny Mac, and I'll readily admit ahead of time it's a little on the spin side. Tom Brady might walk away. He could retire. And if Tom Brady walks away, who's the quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? We know what the Bucs were for a decade plus till Brady showed up. Then he showed up. They won a Super Bowl. They beat the snot out of the Eagles in the playoffs. I thought they were going to beat the Rams this week. They didn't. Shame on their defense. Shame on Todd Bowles. But Tom Brady made Tampa relative again in the NFL. They weren't until he showed up there for more than a decade. He walks out the door. Guess what? Right back to non-relevant. That's a good thing for the Eagles. Tampa's in the NFC. They're a team that the Eagles couldn't get by this year. Had to play in the playoffs. It was a blowout. I don't know if he's going to retire or not, but at least it's being talked about, which means you can cross your fingers, Eagle fans. Tampa could come back to the pack. Aaron Rodgers could retire or could force his way out of town in a trade. Now, if the Packers trade him, I asked this of a guest I had this weekend on CBS, so I'll ask you.
I thought, yes, Rob. Could be. Rob Monty.
Was it Monty yesterday? What do you think they're going to get? Oh, yeah, it was Rob. Well, I asked the guy on my CBS show, then I asked Rob the same question. So let me ask it of John McMullen. What do you think the Packers will get in return if they trade Aaron Rodgers?
It starts with 2 first-round picks. And then because of his age, maybe you can start some wiggle room. It might be 2 first-round picks and another conditional second-round pick that can turn into a first-round pick like the Eagles did with Carson Wentz. So that's where you start, 3 high-level picks, and then you might even have to throw in a player or two or a couple later draft picks. You're getting a haul. You're getting a significant haul. Especially now, we started the show talking about, the recency bias of this game. This game is going to resonate in the NFL. And people look at that game, and I was talking to you about this before the show. Jim Irsay was up at 2 a.m. Tweeting, and I'm trying to pull it up as quickly as I can. And, people in Philadelphia are going to take it as a shot at Carson Wentz, and to a certain degree it is. But so here's what he tweeted. You can see clear as day in the final 8 NFL team playoffs, you need a quarterback and offense who can score 30 or more in regulation and a defense that can hold an opponent under 30. Now, we also see San Francisco in the final 8. It's not true. They won a football game in a most unclassic way possible. But what I said when I read it is you can win a lot of ways, and you've heard me say this to you numerous times, Jody, that you probably are sick of it. But your margin of error is much, much smaller if you're trying to win a game like San Francisco than Green Bay. Now, on one day, in the biggest moment, it worked. But over a larger sample size, the explosive team, the ability to move the football through the air is going to have the better opportunity. That's all people are saying when they say this is the easiest way to win. You can win 100 different ways. But guess what, Jody? If San Francisco, and they're going to go into the NFC Championship game in a domed environment, pseudo dome. There's a little opening, but you get the point. As opposed to wind chill of 0 degrees and all that. But they're not going to go into it saying, hey, we're going to block a punt this week. We're going to block a field goal. We're going to convert a 3rd and 9 run late, and we're going to win a football game. You're not going to do that consistently from week to week to week to week. But if you have an explosive offense, your margin of error significantly increases, not decreases. Doesn't mean you can't lose. We've seen Patrick Mahomes lose. We've seen Tom Brady lose. We've seen Aaron Rodgers lose. They lose the last game more than they win the last game. Even Tom Brady. Talked about that last week.
And oh, by the way, Mr. Irsay, 2 of the games this weekend out of the 4 did not have a team scoring 20 points. Yes, in the snow, in the cold, in Green Bay, San Francisco scoring via special teams, 13-10. Cincinnati, Tennessee was 19-16. That wasn't your 30 to my 20 either. Neither team made it to 20. So just because Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes did what they did doesn't mean that that's what you have to do to win going forward in the National Football League.
But it makes it easier. He's right. It makes it easier. If you have Patrick Mahomes and you have the Kansas City, 4 straight AFC championship games, and he's in 4 straight, again, championship games. Now, they only got 1 so far. And we're back to that only 1.
Weren't the Dallas Cowboys the highest scoring team in the NFL this year?
And Tampa Bay had the highest passing offense. I'm saying it doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it makes it easier. It makes it easier.
It does. I'm looking for guarantees, and I know there are no such thing as guarantees, but I think he was a little overly simplistic with his statement, but that's just me. But my point that we got off was Aaron Rodgers could be in the AFC, could be retired, and if he comes out of the mix, your thoughts on Jordan Love running the Green Bay Packers back?
Enjoy those 6 wins, Matt LaFleur. Enjoy those 6 wins.
So, yeah, all of a sudden, you're taking 2 big targets off the board in the NFC next year if Brady walks away and Rodgers either walks away or gets traded. That's my optimistic spin for this past weekend's playoff action.
Actually, I'm being too harsh now. I'm thinking about it. That division's so bad. I'm going to give Green Bay 8 wins. But enjoy 8
8-9.
wins.
Yeah,
Enjoy,
you and I like
enjoy,
that 8-9 record.
enjoy. I was going to say 500, but now it can't be 500. Enjoy slightly under 500.
Yeah, just sub 500, as a matter of fact. So there's my optimistic Eagle slant or spin for the day.
Yeah, get them out. Get them out.
Brady and Rodgers, not the competition. Now, as far as the AFC goes, in Mahomes, Allen, Burrows, Herbert. Yeah, if you want to win a Super Bowl, you got some more cut out for you because there's some still damn good young quarterbacks over in the AFC. But why don't you get to the Super Bowl first? Then worry about winning that game. I don't think people would complain or bitch or moan too much.
Get to the Super Bowl, then maybe you go win the Super Bowl in an unconventional fashion.
They beat that Brady guy when they got there, so who knows? All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. We got to take our final timeout, and then we'll come back. Put a bow on the show here on Birds.